What is the greatness of Shakespeare? What makes someone like Shakespeare great? Why is it the case that we read Shakespeare now? We're in a different place, we're in a different time. So Shakespeare is separated from us by a chasm of space and time. There must be something to the universality of Shakespeare that allows us today to read and enjoy and learn from him. And I'm going to explore the greatness of Shakespeare by focusing on one of his greatest heroes, Coriolanus. But the play Coriolanus is probably not one that immediately comes to mind when you think of Shakespeare. You think of Hamlet, The Merchant of Venice, you think of Romeo and Juliet, you think of plays like that, King Lear, Othello, but not Coriolanus. Yet this is, I think, a surpassingly great play. If it's the only play Shakespeare wrote, he would still have a global reputation. Now, to me, Shakespeare is very different than a Milton or a Dante, because Milton and Dante are partisans. They have a point of view and they aggressively prosecute it. Their point of view is in some ways expansive, broad, but it's also narrow. So Milton, for example, is aware of Dante. You can see in Milton's Paradise Lost that he almost recreates scenes from Dante, who wrote a few centuries earlier. But Milton is a militant, a Protestant. Dante, of course, was Catholic. Dante lived really before the Reformation. And so Milton doesn't want to acknowledge Dante. There's no acknowledgement in Milton. Even though one of his poems is largely patterned on a scene from the Divine Comedy. So Milton, in that sense, is making his case. And Dante, in his own way, made his case. But with Shakespeare, you get the feeling that there is no case to be made per se, at least not by the playwright himself. The playwright is invisible. He almost disappears. He goes into hiding. And what I mean is that when Shakespeare treats a character, he throws himself into that character so fully that he becomes that character. That character speaks with full conviction, and for the moment, that's Shakespeare. And then you turn to a rival character, and Shakespeare throws himself into that character so that Shakespeare becomes that guy. So this is the sort of incredible richness of Shakespeare. And we're going to see a little bit of this in Coriolanus, which is, by the way, a different kind of tragedy than the tragedies we've come to expect in general, but also from Shakespeare himself. Now, normally when you think of tragedy, think, for example, of Othello, or think about Macbeth, or think about Lear. You think about a main character who is, in a sense, deep and subtle and complex, and usually wrestling with some kind of tremendous moral dilemma. For Lear, it has to do with his legacy. You're the king, you're about to step down. What do you do? How do you divide your kingdom? How do you deal with family members who have different types of agendas? How do you proceed? If you're Hamlet, how do you avenge your dead father? Do you kill your mother and her co-conspirator? Do you act or do you not act? And this is really Hamlet's choice, not just to be or not to be, but to act or not to act. With Othello, how do you respond to these suspicions of infidelity on the part of your wife that have been, assiduously cultivated by, as you don't know it, but it's the villain Iago? What do you do? How do you protect your own pride and your own dignity? And with Macbeth, there's a great scene where Macbeth at the beginning of the play is contemplating killing King Duncan, but he can't do it. And if you listen to what Macbeth says, as he talks about the virtue of Duncan, he talks about the revenge of the gods, he talks about the fact that there's a universal human nature that will not put up with this. He talks about the infant Jesus. So Macbeth roves over philosophical and theological and psychological territory. You can kind of see his wicked, but nevertheless, his mind is going back and forth. His mind is at work. And I think for these reasons, Aristotle's description of tragedy, which is that you've got kind of a great man who has a hamartia. A hamartia is a tragic flaw. Now, the word hamartia means something more like a mistake rather than a flaw. A great man who makes a mistake. This is Aristotle's view of how tragedies are, that the great man is brought low by kind of one thing. But I think that when you apply this to Lear, for example, or to Hamlet, or even to Macbeth, it's not so clear. There, you can identify things that are the one thing. Maybe King Lear is haughty. Maybe Othello is excessively suspicious. It could be that Macbeth is too ambitious, but that doesn't really seem to do justice to what their motives are, to what makes these people who they are. But with Coriolanus, we have a different kind of hero, a different kind of Shakespearean hero. And Coriolanus is, in a sense, one-dimensional. Now, this is not to say that he's a flat or dumb character. It doesn't mean that he can't change. In fact, we see him change back and forth in the play. But what I mean is that he's not multifarious. He's not somebody who has this kind of deep, kaleidoscopic personality. He believes in one thing. And what is the one thing that he believes in? Military heroism. Essentially, Coriolanus is a conqueror. He's a conquering hero. And you see in the play his conquests, and his conquests are truly great. In fact, in the play, we see him at a place called Coriolanus. He gets into a battle with the Volscians, who are the great enemy of Rome. Coriolanus is a Roman. This play is set in Rome. And it's set in Rome in the days of the early Republic. Rome is a republic. They've expelled the Tarquin kings, and they're now being ruled by and large by a patrician or aristocratic class. But the aristocratic class is in league with a plebeian or popular group of people representing, if you will, the tradesmen and the people. And but Rome is besieged. It's being attacked, and its great enemy is the Volscians. And so the Volscians, and all of this occurs during the play. The Volscians attack at Coriolanus, and Coriolanus repels them in a fantastic fashion. In fact, he gets trapped in the Volscian sector. He fights his way out, and then he leads his own troops to a glorious victory over the Volscians. The Volscians are so terrified of him, they compare him to a god. They call him things like Jupiter and Mars. You could almost think in a small society where very small armies were fielded, 4,000 men, 5,000 men, a single man can make a huge difference, particularly a single general, a single leader. And this is what Coriolanus is. In fact, that's where he gets his name. His real name is Caius Marcius, but once his great victory at Coriolanus is so memorable that the Romans take that name, Coriolanus, and call him essentially Coriolanus. And we get Coriolanus from that. So here's Coriolanus, a unquestioned military hero. But he's a military hero who believes that since conquest is the most important thing and other things are less important, and since the patricians or aristocratic class, these are the people who lead the battles, they win the fights, they save Rome from its enemies, the patricians should rule. And of course, the patricians do rule. But they have to rule by making some allowance for the plebeians. In other words, society is a balance. Yes, military leaders are necessary. In fact, they're indispensable. But hey, you need also cobblers, and you need carpenters, and you need tradesmen, and you need laborers. They're important too. And they have, if you will, a sense of their own worth, their own pride, if you will. And so the Roman Republic is based upon a kind of delicate balance in which 80% of the power is with the patricians, but 20 has to be conceded to a group called the tribunes. The tribunes are the ones who are the representatives of the people. And what we see here is a kind of a rift between the tribunes and the patricians. Coriolanus is right in the middle of it. The tragedy of Coriolanus is that he is now up for the position of consul, but to be consul, he has to sort of bend his knee, at least symbolically, to the plebeians. This, it turns out, he is absolutely unwilling to do. And so this is the motor that sets off the plot. I'm doing nothing more today than sort of setting the background. The background is that Rome has just won a battle and repelled its enemies, the Volscians. Coriolanus, the triumphant hero, is now up for consul. To get that position, he has to do only one thing. He has to stand before the plebeians, before the tribunes, their representatives, and ask for their support. And what happens next launches the tragedy of this play. Coriolanus won't do it. The tribunes, who are very cunning, are able to poison opinion against him. And Coriolanus is issued an order of banishment, which, let us just say, he doesn't take very well. I'll close with Coriolanus's response to banishment and then pick up this theme next time, because you get a sense of Coriolanus's personality. He goes, "You common cry of curs." In other words, "You losers." He goes, "You do corrupt my air. I banish you." So what Coriolanus is basically saying is, you people are so stinky. I can't even breathe the air that's coming out of your mouths. And you think you're banishing me? Sorry, I'm banishing you. And this great speech ends with the phrase, "There is a world elsewhere." Coriolanus says, "I'll go someplace else and I'll come back and you'll never forget it."